Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Surprise!
We're back, traders, and
wake up
I
to
just
it.
want to say God bless each and every single one of you guys. Before we jump into this, slap the subscribe button, hit the like button, because that helps the algorithm find this video, and we're trying to grow organically. But all that mumbo jumbo aside, we're going to be talking about AMC, GameStop, and the broader market with a pretty heavy emphasis on that broader market, right? The S&P 500, the IWM index, because when you have catalysts like this one right here, this silly chicken, Donald J. Trump, saying if Iran does not fully open without threat the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours from this exact point in time, the United States will hit and obliterate the various power plants, starting with the biggest one first. Personally, President Donald J. Trump. So this is the kind of fear, right, that causes your fear and greed index to be relatively low. Stock market now sitting in extreme fear, and crypto sitting way past extreme fear for way too long. And I just wanted to say, besides for that, guys, that is genuinely, in my opinion, a sign that the worst may be over. But we're going to talk about the worst case scenario and the best case scenario here, what I think could happen, right, if there is more downside selling pressure, and what the optimistic outline is for a bounce here, because a bounce here does make sense in multiple different ways. If you've stayed this long, thank you so far. I know that was a little bit longer of an intro, but it's important, right? So stay until the end of the video. We're going to start with IWM, because IWM showed some strength here. It genuinely showed some strength here and came down to this horizontal trend line that we had literally almost to a point, guys. But what's even more impressive is the strength of close. You close the day at 242.22. Guess where the 200-day EMA is on the IWM chart? This is the broader index that works with GME and AMC. It closes at 242.22. So you literally closed to the penny, guys. To the penny. Closed on top of the 200-day EMA. Now, if you fail to hold this spot, I do expect a little bit of a flush, because the 200 fail test is a big deal. But the volume was high and yada, yada, yada. There is something to watch for here, though. On the weekly time frame, you have your weekly 50-day EMA sitting at 238.68, which could be your potential bouncing zone, right? You look at how you respect that as well as the 200, but you oftentimes come down here to test. If you fail, you see what happens, right? Flush. But hopefully we don't have to go through that. Yada, yada, yada. I wanted to talk about S&P 500 first, because none of this technical analysis matters. As much as I pride myself in accurate technical analysis, none of this silly stuff matters if this fails, right? This is such a distributive look from the S&P that it's kind of scary, right? When you see the index that everyone's 401ks are leveraged on, everyone's retirement earnings, whatever, right, are leveraged on, to see this kind of disgusting rounding top formation. Not good, right? Especially with the gap sitting currently at 6,000 flat on the SPX. I think there's a good opportunity for a long there, right? If you do see that broader market flush, right, maybe something crazy happens, because the market hates, not optimism, but it hates uncertainty, right? So when you see uncertainty in the markets, that's the best time, not financial advice, that I have found to capitalize on people's fear. And we talked about at the beginning of the video, fear and greed index being very, very, very low. The stocks from the high of the largest index down almost 8% already. And you have gap fills down downwards, right? A lot of signs pointing down. But what gives me hope? What gives me genuine hope as a bull? Because you know how we like to rock and roll here. We are endless bulls. I can't help myself. I pride myself on being bullish. Even though you had this rising wedge, your profit target you've already fulfilled in yesterday's candle, there's a good opportunity here for two things, right? Look at the RSI on the daily time frame. When you were back here and you saw a significant sell-off of 21%, your RSI was very, very similar, guys. You were in a similar territory. You really were. And now you look at now. And the RSI is a touch away from being oversold. In fact, it may already be there. And I think this gives a good optimistic outlook that the end may be near from the selling pressure and you may bounce out of here. In fact, when you look at a potential support trend line that was previous resistance, I made this very, very clear for you guys. I deleted everything except for this line. I'll even delete this one because it doesn't matter. This line, resistance, 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 right? Top, top, top. You spill. V-line, support, support. And now you've come all the way back, right? There's a good opportunity that you find a support here and you find a nice size launch off of this trend line. I really do believe that. And if you can see that, guys, that would come right around that 630 territory. What's right around 630? Any kind of technical confluence? Oh, wait, right? Go to the weekly. SPX is already there. What was that on? IWM? IWM on the weekly. Yeah, that was IWM. Dang, I thought that would be cool. Anything on the monthly? Negative. Well, 630 is what we're looking for. If not 630, you're looking at 6,000 flat on SPX, guys, or the S&P 500, right? Because you do have a nasty, nasty gap fill sitting there. And on the weekly, which is kind of concerning, 5,700. So if you drop 6,000, that's your target to look at. All this mumbo jumbo beside, that's why I wanted to start this video with the indexes, because they matter the most. And when they're not cruising up, it is significantly harder for our lovable boy Jimmy to go and make a run. Now, you've seen the worst case scenario on GameStop for two reasons. The first reason being, you have seen a failure to hold this trend line, right? This was your pennant, whatever you want to call it, flag trend line. You've also seen a failure of a daily golden cross. You saw it trend up, flirt with it, and there's a very good opportunity still here if this thing does find a bounce Monday morning, right? You bounce out of here, you're cooking with Crisco, you're looking beautiful. But whether or not it does that, guys, I think it is very, very likely that you fill the gaps that we talked about in our last video, 21.93, and then I think 21.25 on this stock. And once you do that, guys, that will act as a launch pad, in my opinion, to then bounce out and go hunt these gap fills north, because you have so many gap fills. And honestly, I would much rather this happen, traders, much rather this happen before earnings than after, because we all know the typical earnings date comes around and you do one of these, right? Oh my God, we're going to the moon, psych. And then it just spills over. But if we could fill these gaps and then reverse, guys, I do believe Monday morning, at least this gap, right? Maybe we don't have to come all the way down, but at least that gap, I think that there would be a very, very good opportunity for the buyers to step in there. But on the weekly time frame, we talked about IWM's 200-day EMA. GME showed a little bit of weakness here, closing below the 200-day EMA. However, guys, I wanted to emphasize this for you guys because not a lot of people talk about the Bollinger Bands, right? Not a lot of people do. If you don't know the Bollinger Bands, they are a indicator that show you the squeeziness of a stock, right? They show you when a stock is doing absolutely nothing and the tension builds, the bands will constrict, right? But when they expand, that is often when price goes into discovery mode. You are going very, very volatile and moving between the bands. Now, typically 99% of the price action happens within these bands. Where it gets exciting, right, is when you see moves like this, moves where they pop outside of the bands, or moves where you could ride the wave. Now, what you're seeing from GME, although you failed to close above the 200-day EMA, traders, you freaking nailed it right on the head. You went from the bottom band back in November, touched the top band, right? Bands began to constrict. You consolidated within, and now you've touched the mid band. And one of the most bullish things you can do, traders, bullish things, is you can touch that top band, test the mid band, and you bounce out of it. That is by far the best case scenario, in my opinion, for GME, because you will see these weekly time frame bands begin to expand at a rapid rate like they did here, right? And I want to emphasize this. This would be bullish. When I take a little peeky weeky at NEO, and stay with me, even if you don't like NEO, I don't care. If you go to the weekly time frame and you pull up, or the monthly time frame on NEO, the Bollinger Bands, this is relevant for GameStop. Because when you look at the monthly time Bollinger Bands, take a look at what you did, right? You failed to close above the mid-band, held the mid-band, closed above it, and then you began to run. It was the same story on the weekly, right? Get suppressed beneath the mid-band, break above it, and you run. The daily time frame, oops. So much happened on this chart. The biggest thing is in the monthly, right? You see the expansion from the compression that this stock saw, but once you got back above the mid-band and you closed above it, traders, that was the most bullish thing you could have done. GameStop is in a very similar scenario on the weekly, and if it does it, traders, I do believe that you will break back above $24. But currently, the biggest level to hold is that mid-band, and that mid-band sits right at $22.44. So that will be your level going into next week, considering you're currently at $22.67. On the daily time frame, we talked about the gaps. We talked about the bands. You can see they're beginning to expand on the daily, but let's get rid of that, right? Let's look at the monthly. On the monthly time frame, we talked about the MACD potentially crossing green. That would be freaking phenomenal, but you are beginning to contract outward, so you need to see this ugly monthly candle turn around from earnings. Hopefully. Same thing on the quarterly time frame. 4-hour time frame, not much, to be honest with you, except for the breakdown of that trend line. If you guys are new, make sure to slap the subscribe button. I'm going to try to be here for GME's Tuesday earnings. I'm excited for them. If you pull up the earnings estimate, I'm sure you could do it on your own time. GME has beat the last 6, I believe, earnings. And you can see this on Robinhood, but the last 6 earnings, if they beat again, guys, this is going to be insane. Genuinely insane. But before we wrap things up, let's talk about AMC, our girl Amy, making an all-time low from our last video, which is never a good thing, right? But oftentimes when people are so bearish sentiment-wise on a stock is when I get the most bullish. And the reason is I genuinely think we're near a bottom. I really do. And maybe you guys are not convinced from that, but if I take a little peeky weeky at the chart, right, look at where you are within this falling wedge. I'm just going to delete all the other lines because they don't matter. They really don't. That's a theoretical. That's a theoretical. That's a theoretical. I think the most likely is that you bounce. And the reason I think so, traders, is you look at this trend line. Tap, tap, tap. And this would be your 4th tap of a very important macro trend line. And you're doing it, right? You are doing it. You are at the freaking line. What you do now is entirely up to the stock. But what I expect to happen is I expect this thing to open green. I really, really do. And if you don't, I'm going to be a little bit worried, to be honest, because oftentimes when these things flash beneath $1, they do lose steam and they do tend to spill over. So you need to see this thing regain $1, show some strength on the chart, because if you go to the weekly, guys, look at how low you are on the RSI. You're almost beneath 20. And being beneath 20, traders, is dramatically oversold. And when you look at where you were last time you were this low, right? Take the move from this low. And this is what gives me all the confidence in the world, because you can sit back and confidently say, last time you were this oversold in the RSI, in the next 100 days, you traded above 275% green. The previous time before that, although not the craziest move, right? From the bottom to the top, almost 100% move. So I stand in my conviction. I sit by my words. And I do believe that you are going to find some kind of bounce here on AMC. Although, right, the broader market is going to matter that much, because the broader market flushes, right? You go for that gap fill. There's a high opportunity that AMC does one of these, right? And I don't want to see that. It's possible, but we shall see, right? Like all things, we will know with time. Our biggest goal on AMC was to get back above your weekly RSI band, because typically, right, when you get back above this thing, you see nasty moves, traders, nasty moves. You see wicks like that, 20%, you retest it, right? You see RSI, boom, from $2 all the way up to 13. So just an example, but I think a very relevant one. Give me 1 second. Ay. Okay. We're back, y'all. If you're still here after that, dude, I freaking love you. All right. How we looking? All right. So that is your main goal on AMC. Get back above the weekly RSI band. There are some small things you could do on the daily time frame, right? Bounce within this falling wedge, break out of the falling wedge, and that would give you a nice relief bounce, I assume, to at least the high, sitting at 170. However, on the daily time frame from Weeble's perspective, because Weeble gives you a lot of different trading tools, and I'm not sponsored by Weeble. I just really like their platform. And if you go to the daily time frame, you can see, right, you closed with an uptick in volume, and you closed with a cross down in the daily MACD. You need to quickly, traders, flip that. And I assume you're already doing so, right? You look at after hours, you're already up 2% from AMC in the after hours, almost above $1. So you need to see that flip green, and for this to be a bear trap for everyone who thinks it's going to go lower. And I genuinely do believe that the best is yet to come on AMC. I do believe that. I personally own shares, and we'll see where it goes, right? You risk what you want to. I'm risking what I'm willing to lose, because when I look at the weekly RSI, you're oversold as all get out. You look at the weekly MACD, you're curling up here in a very nice way as volume exhausts selling down, right? Trading down. I expect this thing to find some kind of bid at these low prices. And then for this weekly MACD, flip, right? And then after that, right, you see the weekly RSI bounce from out of the oversold territory. And oftentimes, guys, when you see those bounces, they move, and they move big. So I'm expecting something to happen fundamentally to kind of fuel that bounce. If not, it'll just be a technical move, and we'll take that, right? But genuinely, I hope you guys are having a wonderful freaking weekend. If you haven't already, subscribe, like, share the video.
God bless each and every single one of you guys and your families. And remember, guys, the best is yet to come. I genuinely do believe that. So when you guys are having a rough day, think of me, not in a weird way, but think of those words, right? The best is yet to come. There's so much left in life to live. And I do believe that we will find a way out of this. So much love and peace.